Edge closer to the flames and keep your shoes away from the dew. Tonight's account comes from New Orleans, where humidity carries stories better than paper. There's a hotel that takes no bookings. The concierge insists their guests are all permanent. Don't argue with me, listen, and decide whether the calendar or the key ring is lying.
I'm once heard of a traveler named Evan Rourke, a claims auditor who treated towns like folders and street corners like tabs. He arrived in New Orleans during a slow hurricane season, the kind that spends itself on cloud talk and never lands. His task was routine: verify an old insurer's ledger against actual buildings before the company dissolved for good. On a side street off the quarter, he found a narrow facade with iron balconies that had forgotten to rust. The brass plate named the place Hotel Belladonna. No rate card, no vacancy. Just a door that opened on hinge breadth. Inside waited a desk as clean as a sealed envelope. The concierge in a cream jacket spoke with the restraint of someone who didn't want to wake a hallway. Evan asked about a room in the careful language of men who expense nights. The concierge, by Evan's later account, didn't refuse. He explained the hotel didn't take bookings because it didn't need to. Everyone staying there had already arrived. He called them permanent guests, not with drama, but with bookkeeping finality, and slid a ledger aside as if the subject were settled. Evan thought it a script for exclusivity. He made a note to return with a different pretext. He stood in the lobby long enough to read the ceiling. Plaster flowers, a stain that resembled a cartographer's thumbprint, a fan turning so slowly that the air seemed to rise rather than move. There was no bell. People entered and left softly, none of them carrying luggage. The hall smelled faintly of lemon oil and rain remembered by wood. Evan left with nothing except a nagging sense that the room count on the facade and the silence in the stairwell did not add up. Evan's workday lived in archives. He requested property rolls, fire inspections, and hotel tax filings. The Belladonna appeared in documents like a ship in fog, outlined, then lost. It paid utilities, refused marketing, and maintained a business license with the serene punctuality of a metronome. In a dusty planning file, he found an inspection report from decades ago with a note in the margin: guest list not applicable. The phrase had no citation and no correction. He traced postal deliveries. Parcels addressed to the hotel were always signed for by the same hand, cursive that had learned its confidence before ballpoints. The signature never wavered in thickness or tilt over years. Food invoices were modest and irregular, as if kitchens cooked for a set number that neither grew nor shrank. The elevator maintenance logs were the strangest. Regular service for a car that almost never recorded weight changes. The technician's tablet kept flagging, idle cycle exceeded. The elevator, by the numbers, waited like a held breath. He walked past the hotel at different hours. In late afternoon, the upper windows took the light unevenly, not with curtains, but with the kind of dim that comes from rooms determining their own weather. At midnight, the balconies held no smokers and no secrets, only the sheen of moist air. By morning, the stoop showed the faint, clean scuff of mopped tile inside. Someone kept the place immaculate for people who did not check in. When routine fails, observation replaces theory. Evan watched the housekeeping cart roll out at exactly 10 each morning. Linen stacks in a constant height, bottles in a constant pattern. He counted pillowcases by the sheet's shadow, and found the numbers steady across days. A fixed head count implies a roster. He listened for voices and heard only the distant scrape of a chair where the corridor met the private door. No argument, no TV. The building held sound like a polite pocket. A florist delivered a weekly bouquet of camellias, always the same color, always the same number, placed in a vase on the lobby's side table, and then divided into smaller vases carried down the hall. The petals browned in the same order each week, as if time had negotiated a schedule with the water. Evan noted a waste pattern. The trash on collection day was so consistent that the sanitation crew loaded by muscle memory, 2 pulls, 1 lift, 1 tap against the bin. Variance would have meant new bodies, new appetites, new sleep. There was none. He checked the fire stairs and found the metal treads unworn in the middle and polished at the edges, as if feet preferred to travel close to the rail. The carpeting in the hall lay perfectly flat. A frayed thread near one door remained exactly as it was for 4 days, and then vanished without being cut. He considered asking the concierge why the fray had to wait its turn. He didn't, because sometimes the answer is simply that order protects itself from curiosity. Evan tried to penetrate procedure with procedure. He sent a registered letter requesting a room for a specific date, phrased as an audit necessity. The receipt returned with the concierge's ancient signature and a stamped reply. All guests permanent, no bookings accepted. He tried a second letter offering to pay for an empty room without occupying it as a control. The reply repeated the phrase and added a small emblem in purple ink, an hourglass without sand. He then booked a room through a neighboring hotel with an overbooked list, expecting the Belladonna to accept overflow. No overflow arrived. He spoke to taxi drivers who swore they'd never dropped a fare there, and to kitchen suppliers who delivered routinely. He asked a postal carrier whether the building ever received personal mail for anyone other than the desk. The carrier said the mailboxes inside were brass and narrow, made for postcards in a decade that had already been categorized as vintage when his route began. He remembered no names. Assuming the residents were corporate, he checked corporate records. No company listed the Belladonna as lodging. No per diem lines referred to it. He found a photograph from a local photographer's series on balconies. The Belladonna appeared as a facade among facades. The caption named a different hotel next door. City Memory had accepted the Belladonna's existence, but filed it under Not For You. Evan eventually asked the concierge gently how a hotel could live without vacancies in a city that breathed tourism. The concierge, according to Evan's notes, answered with arithmetic rather than hospitality. The hotel maintained a guest list of fixed length. It did not change unless the building changed, and the building did not change because it had found its balance long ago. He spoke of permanent guests, not as a superstition, but as a category anybody could audit. These were people who had once stayed and had chosen, by whatever word they used in their own heads, not to leave. Evan writtenly objected to the physics. The concierge tilted his ledger as a man might tilt a mirror to keep sun off a sleeping face. He explained that in certain places, particularly where water carries time slower than air, tenure can become a structure. The hotel maintained the structure by honoring every stay as an extension rather than a repetition. There were no bookings because the book was already written. Newcomers could wait in the lobby, read the ceiling, and understand the rule before their coffee cooled. Evan walked the hall one last time that afternoon, careful not to test any doorknob. He found a corkboard near the staff door with tiny cards pinned in 2 columns. The left column held numbers, the right, small emblems, a fountain pen, a ticket stub, a pressed leaf, a sliver of shell. The emblems felt like private mnemonics for lives arranged without names. He did not copy them. He stood long enough to realize that desire to belong can be measured with the same tools that measure restraint. Weather likes to audition for conclusions in New Orleans. A storm built itself over the river one evening, and then, like a tired rumor, refused to make land. The air gathered anyway. Evan waited in the hotel's doorway, not inside and not on the street. The lobby hummed as if electricity remembered a previous building. Somewhere in the upper floors, water traveled through pipes at a constant rate, unhurried and without the chatter that empty rooms give to plumbing. He watched the elevator's floor indicator blink without moving. At midnight, the city thinned. The concierge stepped out from the desk with a set of keys that looked hand-filed. He carried them into the hall, counted softly, in Evan's later phrasing, as one counts after a metronome breaks, and hung one key on a hook, removing another. No nameplates, only positions. The exchange was mechanical and gentle, like adjusting weights on a scale. Evan understood then that permanent did not mean immortal. It meant the hotel had achieved a roster that replaced without erasing. A departure here was not an opening. It was a shift that restored balance. He returned to the street and stood in the damp. The balconies above him held their shape like parentheses around an unfinished clause. A woman crossed the corner dragging her suitcase wheels, not toward the belladonna, but away from it, as if repelled by a magnet too mild to mention. The storm unbuilt itself by 2 a.m. The hotel's glass held the shape of rain that never fell. Evan closed his file with more accuracy than satisfaction. He reported that the belladonna met its obligations as a business and violated nothing but expectation. He wrote, with the flattened tone he reserved for facts that could not be invoiced, that the property operated at full occupancy without bookings, and that attempts to secure lodging were met with a consistent explanation, not inconsistent with the building's internal logic. He recommended no action. Before leaving New Orleans, he passed the hotel one final time at dawn. The camellias had arrived early, or perhaps the florist had anticipated the weather. The concierge stood at the threshold polishing the brass plate with a cloth the color of old paper. A cart waited with linen stacked to the same height as always. A single leaf from the bouquet had fallen, and someone had left it on the side table rather than throw it away, as if objects that once held shape had the right to finish holding it. Evan walked on. In his notebook, he left one line without a checkbox. Some addresses don't welcome. They recognize. He suspected the belladonna recognized desire the way a well-run archive recognizes a researcher's patience, by what they're willing not to ask for.
Feed the fire. New Orleans will do the rest. The morale, if you need one, is simple enough. Some doors are not entries but continuations. A hotel that takes no bookings isn't being cruel. It's defending a sum that adds cleanly when nobody presses it. If you stand in that lobby long enough, You'll learn whether you wanted a room or a rule. And if you hear linen breathe like a tide, let it be. Not all permanence is stubbornness. Sometimes it's grace disguised as housekeeping.